Hello, and welcome to the Education Connections webinar. We all teach ELLs, Practical Applications of Language Acquisition Theory for Special Area Teachers. My name is Joanna Duggan, and I will be moderating this afternoon's session. We are delighted to be joined this afternoon by Karen Gregory and Gretchen Oliver of Gregory and Oliver Consulting, LLC. Karen Gregory is an educational consultant committed to advocacy for English learners and their teachers. Calling upon her background as an educational researcher and a teacher of Spanish and ESL, she conducts professional development seminars and workshops. Karen has taught TESOL methodology at University at Albany, SUNY, as well as language and pedagogy courses at Union Graduate College, and is a former high school teacher. Gretchen Oliver is the coordinator of a U.S. Department of Education grant-funded research and professional development project through the National Professional Development Program. In addition, she has taught TESOL methods classes at University at Albany, SUNY, and Hunter College, CUNY. As a former K-12 teacher of French in New York State schools and English as a foreign language teacher in France, she draws heavily upon her experience as a practitioner in professional development workshops and seminars that she conducts. Thank you, Karen and Gretchen, for being with us this afternoon. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's been able to join us today for our third Education Connections webinar of the 2016-17 school year and our 20th webinar in our ongoing series of live events. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, both to those of you who are already a part of the Education Connections community, as well as those of you who may be new to Education Connections. We're so glad you could all be here. We'll begin today's session with a brief introduction, including an overview of Education Connections. Next, we'll hear from Karen and Gretchen. Following their presentation, we'll have some time reserved for questions and comments from participants. We'll be monitoring questions as they come in, and we encourage you to send along any thoughts or questions that come to mind during the presentation, using the questions box in the GoToWebinar window. During today's session, we'll also be posting some polling questions relating both to your background and today's topic. Once results are in, we'll post them for you to view. We also invite you to chat further about today's topic by joining us on Twitter. You can use the hashtag EdConnects, EDCONX, to participate in the conversation with Education Connections staff and your fellow educators. For those of you who may be new to Education Connections, we wanted to briefly introduce you to the community and resources available. Education Connections is an initiative of the Center for Applied Linguistics in collaboration with the University of Oregon. It is hosted on the University of Oregon's Obaverse platform. Education Connections is a free online community providing access to a wide range of resources and bringing educators together to collaborate around implementing high-quality, standards-based instruction with all students and especially English learner students. There are many different ways to participate in Education Connections. You can share ideas and ask questions in the discussion forums, find resources to use in your classroom, and participate in live events such as this one, and read Tuesday's tips and Friday's fun facts that are shared in the forums every week. Anyone is welcome to join, so we invite you to sign up today if you're not already a member. As a reminder, the Education Connections team will post a video archive of today's webinar, a PDF of the PowerPoint, and links to resources related to today's webinar. To access these resources, log on to Education Connections and click on the Live Events tab. On your screen, you'll now see a few polling questions regarding your background, and we'll post these results as they come in. So our first question asks, what is your current position? General education teacher, instructional coach or teacher educator, an ESL, ESOL or bilingual teacher, an ELL, ESOL or bilingual coordinator or administrator, or other? So try and think whatever category best fits your current role. And we'll give attendees a few more seconds to answer this question. Okay, you should now see the results sharing on your screen. We have about 8% general education teachers with us, 36% instructional coach or teacher educator, 12% ELL, ESOL bilingual teacher, 20% ELL or ESOL bilingual coordinator, and 24% other. So thank you all for joining us today. And we have a second question which asks, with which grade levels do you primarily work? The options being pre-K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12, pre-K to 12, or college or university. So again, just try and pick the answer that best relates to your situation. And we'll give folks a few more seconds to answer this question. Great, and it looks like we have a pretty good mix of people all across the range, pre-K to 5, none who are explicitly middle school, but we do have a lot who are pre-K to 12, a few college university, and some that are only 9 to 12. So again, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today. We are now going to turn it over to Karen and Gretchen for their presentation.
Okay, we'll just pull our presentation up. So thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We will be talking about how special area teachers of PE, health, music, and art can apply language acquisition theory to their instruction to better understand ELLs and better engage all students.
Hi everyone, this is Gretchen. I'm so happy that you're joining us for this webinar. Just for those of you who aren't ESOL, ESL, TESOL people, we just wanted to go over a couple of acronyms that we'll be using as we go through the webinar. When you hear us say ELL, we're referring to those students who are learning English either as a new or an additional language, recognizing that they may already be bilingual. We may at times say ENL instead of ESL or ESOL because last year in our home state of New York, ESL was changed to ENL. So if we slide or we slip up there, that's why. And we'll also refer to TESOL, which stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. So as we introduce ourselves, we thought it would be equally important to introduce these terms in case anyone was unfamiliar with them.
Okay, so we have some guiding questions for today's webinar. As you participate in this webinar, you'll see that we may ask questions to get you thinking about your teaching contexts. We'll give you some time to think and reflect as we go through the presentation, and we would encourage you to jot down some of your ideas. We'll have time at the end for questions and to address any of the areas that you'd like to revisit. So here are some of the guiding questions that we intend to answer over the next hour. How can special area teachers tailor their instruction to meet the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse students? What are the linguistic demands of special area classes? How can special area teachers apply theories of second language acquisition to support ELLs in their content areas? And what types of strategies can special area teachers use to support the development of both receptive and expressive language for ELLs?
So we're going to address 3 different areas in this webinar today. First, understanding our students. What do all teachers need to know about their English language learners? Understanding language. What do special area teachers need to know about learning a new language? And then instructional strategies. How can special area teachers scaffold and differentiate their instruction to support ELLs in their classes? We'll address we want to ground this presentation in the idea that making connections with our students is so vitally important. We've been doing some work with some special area teachers in a local school district, and some of them told us last week that without connections to our students, all the strategies in the world won't make a world of difference. So it is also important to know how people learn a new language, and we'll be conducting a brief simulation so that you can get a small sense of what it's like for an ELL to be in a special area class. In addition, we'll review 3 prevalent learning theories and discuss the stages of language acquisition. And then finally, we're going to share those practical applications that you'll be able to take back to your context and apply them to your practice.
Okay, so as Gretchen said, we're starting with the topic of understanding our students so that we all remember that students are really the focus of our attention. Oftentimes, our ELLs students are quiet in their classes, and special area teachers who teach so many students may have a hard time getting to know who they are. So in this segment of our webinar, we'll give you some practical ideas to help you connect with your ELLs and also some understanding of why this is so important.
All right, so there are many subgroups in the English language learner population. There are newcomers, so those students who are new to the country. Developing English language learners, those are students who've been identified as ELLs and who received English as a second language instruction as a component of their bilingual education or as their ESL program for a total of 4 to 6 continuously enrolled school years in the United States. Our long-term ELLs are those who've been in the system for 7 or more years. Former ELLs are students who have tested out of ESL services. English language learners with disabilities, those are our students who also have IEPs, our individual educational plans. And then our SLIFE students, those are students with limited, inconsistent, or interrupted formal education. This means they've been in the system for less than 12 months and who upon their initial enrollment in schools are 2 or more grade levels below in literacy in their home language and or 2 or more years below grade level in math due to inconsistent or interrupted schooling prior to their arrival in the United States. So why is this information important? Well, we know that an English learner is not an English learner is not an English learner. Teachers really need to approach their lesson planning and delivery with an awareness of the fact that they're going to have different types of English language learners in their classes. That there are challenges sometimes that are present when we have all of these students grouped into our classes together. And so we need to think about the scaffolds that we're using when we have different level proficiency students in our classes. And then finally, some of those subgroups like our newcomers, our SLIFE, and our English language learners with disability, they have unique needs that differ from the other subgroups in the ALL population. So I'd like to just kind of end this slide with the NBC public service announcement, the more you know, and that knowledge is power. So the more we know about our students, the better we can serve them.
So then, of course, that begs the question, how do we get to know our students? So Freeman and Freeman write, it sounds so simple, but if we as teachers put more effort into who we are teaching, more of the what would take care of itself. Gretchen and I strongly believe this to be true, and in our professional development work with teachers from all content areas, we have found that when teachers know more about the students they teach, they develop relationships with their ELLs students, and they can craft instruction that is relatable, engaging, accessible, and culturally relevant. One piece of information you'll want to know, for example, is how long your ELLs have been in this country and where they came from. You'll want to know what their experience has been in learning English so far.
So in the same way that our ELLs go through stages of English language learning, they'll also pass through stages of cultural accommodation. But these stages might be less defined and more difficult to notice. So being aware of the stages might help you to better understand those unusual actions and reactions that might just be a part of adjusting to a new culture. So for newly arrived ELLs, they may first experience a period of euphoria where they're excited about their new surroundings. Keep in mind that your students who are with very beginning levels of English language proficiency, they might show this enthusiasm in different ways. For example, having smiles from ear to ear than those who are at immediate and advanced levels of proficiency. We'll talk about more about that later, but just keep that in mind. Next, students may experience culture shock once the newness is worn off. Culture shock can be manifested in a variety of ways, from showing hostility or frustration, to homesickness or resentment toward the new culture. We've heard teachers say, I don't know what happened to student X. He seems so happy, and then all of a sudden I cannot get him to smile. Well, he might be going through that culture shock phase. And then from there, they may move into an acceptance phase, and then hopefully into an assimilation or adaptation phase. Different students progress differently through these stages at different rates and may stay in one phase longer than others. We also wanted to share this great source with you about creating a welcoming classroom environment for ELLs. There's a link here to Colerain, Colorado, which has a wealth of resources for teaching ELLs, and this article is a really great resource about cultural accommodation.
So knowing your students' skills, interests, and background can help you to create activities that will bring them in and get them excited to learn your special area content. If you are an art teacher and know that a student loves animals, you'll be able to connect your curriculum and learning activities to meet the interests of that child. That connection and demonstration of interests will often begin to bridge the language gap that may exist and might be frustrating to both teachers and students. So thinking about, what do you know about your students? What do they want you to know about them? How do you take what you have learned and apply it to your practice? A recent New York Times article about a teacher, Kyle Schwartz, highlights the important information students will share with you when you ask them. This teacher had her students finish the sentence, "I wish my teacher knew," and here are some of the answers they gave. I wish my teacher knew I'm smarter than she thinks I am. I wish my teacher knew I want to learn more about history. I wish my teacher knew that my mom might get diagnosed with cancer this week, and I've been without a home 3 different times this year alone. So each of these are crucial pieces of information to who these students are and ways for you to connect with them and make your curriculum and your subject area more relevant to who they are and where they're at. If you want to see that entire New York Times article, there's a link there on this slide that later on you can click to and read it.
Okay, so how do you take all this information that you're getting from your students about who they are and what their interests are and what's going on with them? How do you assemble that and categorize it and keep everything straight? One of the things that we've done with the teachers that we've worked with is we've developed a tool. Something like this, as simple as this, where they can start to compile this information, perhaps share it with one another, maybe the special area teachers in consultation with the ESL teachers. But, you know, just basic information. First of all, not just the student's name, but how the student pronounces his or her name. Where the student is from, what the student's home language is or home languages are, where the student currently is with their proficiency level. And so if you're a special area teacher, this is information that you should be able to get from one of the ESOL specialists in your building. It's also important to know how long they've been in the U.S., maybe even if they are SLIFE or if they have an IEP or some other information there. And then, of course, thinking about them as a whole, not just as the person that sits in front of you, but also a little bit about their background, their interests. So as you start to kind of peel away the layers, other information that you glean from them. We've found that with the teachers that we've worked with, that when they're able to share a document like this through some type of cloud-based program, maybe Google Docs or something like that, it becomes a living document, and both teachers can add to it, revise it, as they get more information about their students, as new students come in, as students leave. So this is a tool that we advocate our teachers using.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about getting to know your students and understanding your students, and so we're going to move into the next segment of our webinar, dealing with language and understanding how languages are learned. So once you've made those solid connections with your ELLs students and you know a bit about their background and interests, you'll want to do the same for understanding their language proficiency. Knowing where students are at linguistically and what you can reasonably expect will guide your instructional planning, your differentiation strategies, and your interaction with your ELLs students. So to begin thinking about how languages are learned, we would like to take you all through a simulation to give you the experience of being a language learner in a content class. If you are a professional developer, we have found this to be a very useful activity to help teachers understand the challenges their ELLs face every day in school. So, as the saying goes, don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes, and we're thinking the same goes for our ELLs students. It's easier to understand where they're coming from when we've had a bit of a similar experience as they've had.
Okay, so we're going to play just a little bit less than a 2-minute video clip of something in French related to the special area of art. And we have 8 questions that we've put together that I'm pulling up here. We'd like for you to take a look at those questions. And as we play this video clip, we would like for you to answer these questions to the best of your ability. So I'll just leave them right there for 1 more minute, not even, for you to look at before playing the video. Okay, here we go. Oh, there's an ad, of course.
You know the feeling.
I'll skip that ad.
Can we keep it small?
I'll
So
make
they
it.
can see the questions?
Yeah, we'll keep it small here so that you can see the questions. And I'm just going to cue it up to the spot where I'd like to start.
Comme vous savez certainement, l'impressionnisme naît en France au XVIIIe siècle, plus précisément entre 1870 et 1880. Le nom du mouvement artistique provient du titre d'un tableau de Claude Monet, Impression, soleil levant. Les peintres impressionnistes comme Monet, Manet, Degas, Renoir utilisaient leur perception pour exprimer l'impression fugace que génère la lumière et les objets, et qui change selon le lieu, l'heure et la saison. C'est pour cette raison qu'ils adoraient la peinture en plein air, les paysages, les sujets simples du quotidien. L'impressionnisme, en effet, transgresse les règles de la tradition de l'art visuel. Plutôt que de reproduire la réalité, les peintures impressionnistes montrent seulement des impressions, jugées à l'époque sans valeur par les critiques. La première manifestation officielle du nouveau courant artistique eut lieu en 1874 à Paris et créa un scandale énorme à cause de son contenu radical. Aujourd'hui, vous pouvez admirer la majeure partie de ces merveilleuses peintures au musée d'Orsay, à Paris, une ancienne gare qui a été transformée en musée. Ora, riassumiamo le nuove.
Okay. So hopefully that video played okay for you and that you were able to hear it and you were able to get some information from it to be able to answer those questions. So I'd like to just take a minute to review the answers to those questions with you, and if you got it right, give yourself a little star, and if you didn't get it right, that's okay too. So number one, the Impressionist movement began between 1870 and 1880, and it took place in Paris, France. It got the name Impressionism from a Monet painting called Impressions of Sunrise. Some of the most influential artists were Monet, Manet, Degas, and Renoir. Their primary focus was the impression that light makes on objects and how that changes depending on the place, the time, the hour, and the season. They liked to paint outside. Impressionists tried to capture the impressions made by light instead of trying to reproduce objects in their reality. And in number 7, they were not well received by their contemporaries. At their first showing, their critics thought this form of art was scandalous. And finally, number 8, you can find the majority of this type of art in Paris at the Musée d'Orsay, which is a museum, but it once was a trade station. Oh, so let's not do that. Okay.
Okay, so let's think about what this experience was like. If you have some knowledge of French already, you may have found that pretty easy. But if French is a foreign language to you or a brand new language for you, it was probably much more challenging. So here are a few more things to think about. So what key words in French did you need to know to understand this video? Maybe we could think about if there were key words, would it have helped to have learned them in advance? What challenges did you face in watching this video and answering the questions? What strategies did you use to help? What strategies did you use that helped you understand the video? For example, did you find that the subtitles helped you? Now we're not expecting you to answer. You can jot down these answers as you're listening. You can think about them. Another one, something else we might want to think about is, wait a second, technical difficulty. Okay. What background knowledge or cross-cultural understandings are helpful in understanding this video? So if you already have some knowledge of Impressionism or of these artists, you may have known some of these answers already. You might see that the background experience is really helpful in helping you understand a language you don't know. What role did your formal educational experiences play in how well you understood this? And how did you feel watching this video and answering the above questions? If you felt like it was moving kind of quickly and you were a little bit stressed out, you probably had a similar experience to what your ELLs feel in their classes every day. As you can see from the simulation, if French is new to you, it's quite a challenge.
So there are some other considerations and ways that we address the challenge, and I love that we have a question up here, or a comment saying the question should have been in French too. We made this a little bit easier for you. We asked you to listen and read in a new language, but we allowed you to respond to the questions in your home language. But imagine if you were asked to answer those questions in French so that you had to produce language too. Would that have complicated this activity for you? So how would you feel if that was the case? And we want to say that, you know, this is the reality that our ELLs face in our classrooms every day. They're constantly being able to, or being asked to listen and read and speak and write in English, and sometimes without the support in their home language. All right. So that's just some of the key vocabulary from that last little video clip.
So, as we said during that simulation, sorry, a little cold. As we said during the simulation, knowing some key vocabulary in advance will help your ELLs to be able to do the work of your classes. Explicit vocabulary instruction and vocabulary practice is often needed. Now, each school subject will have its own set of linguistic demands, specialized vocabulary, and grammatical constructions that are most often used. Many times, common words have secondary meanings in music, art, PE, or health class. So we have here some examples. So in music class, we can talk about a chorus of a song versus the chorus, a group of singers. The word beat has different meanings in music than it does in other contexts. Tempo is a subject-specific word. And notes, as in musical notes, are different than a note you might write a friend. A musical score is different than in PE class, say, scoring a goal. Okay, as we go through these, if you're a music teacher, you might want to keep thinking about what are some others. What are subject-specific words, and what are words with dual meanings? In art class, some of the words we thought of are shade. If you ask a student to shade in a drawing, it's different than a shade you might pull on a window. Color scheme is unique to art. A brush has several meanings. Stroke has several meanings. And again, you can think of others. In PE class, a plate, as in home plate, is different than a dinner plate. A base has a unique meaning. A match, there is a game in PE class. And a goal is a specific thing. And again, score, different than musical score. Okay, and in health class, the word value is a difficult word. Domestic, AIDS, diet, as in a healthy diet. And then I'm sure you can think of others. So this kind of activity, going through your curriculum, going through the lessons that you're teaching or a unit, and pulling out those words that might have different meanings for your subject, and that might also just be a little bit confusing. And teaching those explicitly will be an important thing to do.
So to complicate things further, there are linguistic demands that extend beyond vocabulary, and so we'd like to just highlight those for you and to kind of ask you to think about what they might be in particular special area classes where you teach. First of all, grammatical structures. This refers to language beyond individual vocabulary words and phrases. It includes spelling, sentence formation, word order, tenses. We also need to think about discourse competencies, which this involves the ability to connect those correctly formed phrases and sentences in coherent and cohesive message in a particular style, for example, formal versus informal. Another example, providing information versus justifying a position. And then third of all, pragmatic understandings. This can be described as the use of language that is appropriate for a given context and the understanding that there are differences from one context to the next. That they take into account factors such as rules, social conventions, the status of participants, cultural norms. And so as our students progress through the day, the way that they speak and that they're expected to interact with one another is different from one class to the next. And for an L, it takes time to learn these rules. So there's more than just vocabulary words that they need to acquire as they develop their English language proficiency levels.
So to bring it back to vocabulary, as you may already know, vocabulary can be divided into 3 categories. Tier 1, or everyday or common words. So some examples would be study, write, book, words they'll see everywhere. Tier 2 words are common academic vocabulary words that they'll see across many classes, such as analyze, evaluate, hypothesis. And then Tier 3 words are the words that are specific to a content area, such as hypothalamus, onomatopoeia, theorem. So most students learn Tier 1 words through exposure to them and do not need to spend much time learning or practicing them. Tier 2 and 3 words, however, will be challenging to ELLs, and those do need to be explicitly taught. So think about what these Tier 2 and Tier 3 words may be in your subject area, music, health, art, PE, and what you can do to teach and practice these words in your class. If you have something to write on, jot down a short little list of Tier 2 and Tier 3 words that your students will encounter. And then later on, you can develop a strategy for teaching these words explicitly. We would suggest a multimodal approach so that students practice saying the words, they see a visual representation, a picture of some kind if possible, and then also have a written definition and how it's used.
So we asked our special area teachers that we worked with to do this and to think about the linguistic demands of their classes and also to think about what types of activities they could incorporate to support this linguistic development. And so here are some pictures of the ideas that they came up with. I'm going to highlight the phys ed teachers. We had phys ed teachers who were at the elementary level as well as the high school level, and they were able to identify some common everyday words such as inches, practice, running, some cross-discipline academic words such as standards, flexibility, stretching, and then there were some PE-specific words like hamstring and muscle location. So it doesn't even need to be simple words. It can be single words. It can be words that are combined together that when they're put together, they have a new, different meaning. You'll see that they also thought of some activities that they could use to support the development of this academic vocabulary, such as listening cues, writing cues for directions, and then using videos to demonstrate. You'll see there too that the art and health teachers did the same, and we were able to capture that as well.
So how do people learn a new language? We're going to give you a brief historical perspective of some second language acquisition theories. So to help you better understand how languages are learned, we'll spend the next few minutes talking about these theories. They developed over time, we'll start with Skinner's ideas on behaviorism, which were published in the 1950s, and then Chomsky and his innatist theory, following shortly after as a critique and response to behaviorism, and then social interactionist theory evolved from there, based largely on the sociocultural theories of Vygotsky. Each theory built upon the others, and we believe that there is something to be learned from each of them.
So I'm going to start out with behaviors theory. You might think of positive and negative reinforcement and stimulus response reinforcement when you think of behaviors theory. What is also important to note is that language acquisition happens through interactions between parents, caregivers, and children. So for example, you might have seen a parent with her child trying to get the child to say a word, and when the child does in fact say it, the mother cheers and applauds. Or maybe a parent who's trying to get his child to sing a song by singing it over and over again with him. So these situations are behaviorism at their core.
Okay, so Chomsky responded to Skinner's behaviorist language theories with a simple question that turned that theory on its head. If children only learn languages by imitating what they hear their parents saying, then how is it that they sometimes say things that they've never heard before? So he theorized that infants are born with a biological language acquisition device. He called this the LAD. Infants universally possess an innate grammar template or universal grammar that allows them to select out the many grammatical rules of the language they hear spoken around them, and that they gradually construct the grammar of their own native language. And that children construct grammar through a process of hypothesis testing. From this innatist perspective, linguists develop many new theories of language acquisition, and all of these theories focus on the idea that languages are learned naturally through communication rather than the memorization of rules.
So then Vygotsky and his contemporaries came in with, I guess, a resolution to this debate versus nature or nurture with his interactionist theory. Vygotsky and others believe that it's through interactions with others that children collaboratively learn from and with one another. They believe that children want to be able to communicate with others, and with the help from adults and more able peers, they can develop language over time through their social interactions. And with this theory, there's the idea that children are born with powerful brain that matures slowly and predisposes them to acquire new understandings that they're motivated to share with others. So it's this idea of the social and that it takes time for this to fully develop. So how can all of this be applied and help special area teachers? Well, we can conclude that the theories each contribute to our understanding of how languages are learned, and that each theory builds upon the one that preceded it. Behaviorism, for example, tells us that repetition, call and response, language drills, and rewards can all help students learn a second language or a new language. Innatist theories tell us that we were all born to speak and to learn languages, that any person without language-related cognitive disabilities will be able to learn if given support and time. And interactionist theory drives home the point that languages are social, and to learn them we must interact with one another by speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So we'd like for all of you to think about your special areas, and we'd like for you to think about the activities that you do with your students. Are they more heavily aligned to one theory over the other two? And knowing more about these theories, are there things that you may try to do more of or differently moving forward with your ELLs?
The other side of understanding language learning has to do with understanding the predictable stages that people move through as they learn a new language. On this slide, you see that there are 5 predictable stages that language students go through. The first is the pre-production stage, also sometimes called the silent period. In this stage, students are just taking it all in, and they may not be able to produce any language yet. Typically, they'll be very quiet in your classes. Next is the early production stage, when students begin to speak their first words of English. At this stage, students still need a lot of scaffolding from teachers, and they may be only able to give one-word answers. In the third stage, speech emergence, students are able to comprehend spoken English, and they can produce original language. However, expect students at this stage to still make lots of grammatical mistakes and to still need quite a bit of support in academic settings. When students reach the final stages of intermediate and advanced fluency, they will be able to understand and produce language very well. But one thing to be aware of is that the social language of ELLs immersed in American schools will develop more quickly than their academic language, so sometimes a student may seem more proficient than he or she really is.
So how do we understand these stages of acquisition? Well, some say in terms of how long it takes to move through them from pre-productive to fluency. Some people say that it takes 4 to 6 years, others say 7 to 10 for those who are not literate in their home language. So we're going to give the number of 5 to 7. But this really accentuates the importance of knowing your students, their entry points, whether or not they can read or write in their home language. Research has also shown that students who continue to develop their home language are able to learn English more quickly. So there is that importance of literacy in their first language. And so how can we help our students to develop this fluency? Well, scaffolding instruction for content area teachers asking their ESOL teachers for help, teaching academic vocabulary explicitly, and once they have moved, into more intermediate and advanced levels of proficiency, then moving to correct their language errors. There is an article here that we've linked up that you can consult after this webinar.
Okay, so Gretchen and I have created a teacher tool. This is a document you can go back to. Can we click on that?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open this up, and this is linked up to a Google document, so you can go back to this. So you can see we have developed tiered questioning prompts and teaching strategies that would be appropriate at each level of language proficiency. This document was adapted from work we found by Hill and Miller in 2013 and Robertson and Forticolorine in Colorado. and the full citations for those texts can be found at the end of the document.
So do you want to say anything more about that?
I think we're just going to leave that alone, and you can check that out later. We're realizing we're a little pressed for time, so we might start moving a little quicker.
Okay, so just to kind of wrap this up, this part of it, how can we use this knowledge as we design our lessons? Well, we know that students need to be exposed to comprehensible input, but they also have to be given opportunities to produce comprehensible output. So what does that mean? Well, they need to be able to afford the time to speak with one another and to practice with the new language. So this means the development of receptive skills, meaning listening and reading, and productive skills, speaking and writing. And we also would suggest that rather than trying to develop these skills and using them independently of one another, the teachers should strive to help students develop and use them in an integrated way, meaning all together.
Okay, so that takes us to the third and final segment of our webinar today, which is focused on instructional strategies that take into consideration both the language acquisition theories we just discussed and also the needs of special subject areas of music, art, health, and PE. So Gonzalez, Moll, and Amanti write about the funds of knowledge of ELLs students. What this means is that English language learners bring many resources and lived experiences to the classroom with them. Students have both prior formal and informal learning experiences that influence their future learning. They are not merely blank slates coming to the classroom as empty vessels ready to be filled with knowledge. Students in school and out of school experiences should be valued and connected to new learning. We call this an asset view of learners focused on what they can do and what they bring to the class and how they enrich the learning community. And this is in opposition to a deficit view of students which focuses on what they can't do and their deficiencies.
So keeping in mind the idea that Karen just presented, that our students do not come to us as empty vessels ready to be filled with knowledge, they come to us with experiences and they have many strengths. It's our job as educators to learn about them and use the knowledge to inform our planning and instruction. So if we start from a can-do stance, meaning thinking about what they can do instead of focusing on any challenges that might present themselves, and then we move from there, we're taking our steps to be culturally responsive educators. So again, think about what they can do.
Okay, so one way to both engage students and respect their funds of knowledge is by focusing on culturally responsive practices. Jimenez et al. In 2015 tell us that there are three components of a culturally responsive framework. There's teacher disposition toward ELLs, pedagogical knowledge, and the use of students' native language and its relationship to the new language. So this views students as emergent bilinguals or even multilinguals.
So we're going to focus on pedagogical knowledge, and I want to pose the question, how can teachers make their content accessible and deliver it in ways that students can understand it, tapping it into their ELLs funds of knowledge? We want you to think about the ways that you can meet students at their current entry points, the ways that you can use their prior learning experiences, both formal and informal. We also want you to think about how you can make connections to students' families and home cultures. And DeJong and Harper tell us that it's not enough for mainstream teachers to just employ just good teaching practices in their instruction. That teachers of ELLs must first work to meet their unique needs, and thereafter all of the students in your classes will benefit, because these strategies work for all students. All right, so we're going to talk to you a little bit about building background and encouraging interaction, as these are a couple of strategies that we have found to be very culturally responsive and effective for meeting the needs of our culturally and linguistically diverse students. So first, with building background, how does encouraging ELLs to speak reflect culturally responsive teaching? Well, it encourages them to be active participants, to be engaged, and to speak in class. One way to do this is to employ speaking scaffolds during small group activities, word banks, sentence starters, incomplete scripts. We have some strategies, think, pair, share, that you may have heard of, circle chats, and an adaptation of this that we like to call walk and talk. KWL charts, worksheet remix, which is another thing that we'll take you through, and Freyer model posters.
Okay, so we're just going to kind of quickly go through each of these instructional strategies and in how they relate to special area classes. Okay, so as Gretchen just said, we want to get our ELLs speaking and interacting with one another in their classes. Music, art, PE, and health are great classes for this because of the very practical and often hands-on nature of the course content. However, ELLs will need scaffolding to be able to speak. Teachers can create word banks, sentence starters, or incomplete scripts to give students extra support. It's important to note that this should be a temporary support and used to foster student independence. This support needs to be gradually reduced over time or removed as students' language proficiency develops. If you want to see more of what these look like in action, you can see some of these at teachingchannel.org. Okay, so we have here a basketball word wall.
That's art, I think.
Oh, and another art word wall. We can't see our full screen, so apologies. And there's a music word wall. So word walls are one way to help students remember the words that you're using in class so they can use them when they talk about your content area. Okay, another strategy we like to teach teachers is think, pair, share, and circle chats. So think, pair, share is a commonly used strategy in which students first think about the answer to a question independently. They might write an answer down or just think about it. Then they talk to a partner about their answer, and finally they share the answer with the group. This strategy works especially well with ELLs because it gives them the time they need to process what they want to say and produce a response. It allows for interaction when they share with a partner, and they're able to build confidence by checking with a partner before sharing with the group. Circle chats, circle chats are another way to get ELLs to speak and use English in class. This is an activity that's easily adaptable to any content area. So in a circle chat, the teacher creates groups of students and has them stand or sit in two circles, one inside circle and one outside circle. Students are face to face with the person opposite them. Students can be given questions to discuss or multiple choice questions to answer or problems to complete. They work with one person and then the circle moves so that they get a new partner. In this way, students are able to talk to multiple classmates about course content within one class period. However, for any of these interaction and speaking activities, remember that you may still need to provide speaking scaffolds like word walls or word banks, sentence starters for some students.
So it's a little bit different when you're in a gym or you're on a track or you're on a field, and so you might need to approach pair activities differently. So in talking to the PE teachers that we've worked with, they've said we need to get kids moving. We need to get them active and moving. So we came up with this activity to kind of meet in the middle someplace. So maybe you have to test your students in PE at the end of a unit, and you want to have them reviewing vocabulary words and definitions, or have some type of short answer questions for them to answer. So what we would do here is pair students up or get them in a trio and take whatever questions or vocabulary you want to reinforce with them and put them on index cards and set your students out to walk around the gym, walk around the field, and talk about these vocabulary words or these questions. Once the pair or the trio has finished with one set, they would swap them out with another set. So this is a structured way, a scaffolded way to reinforce the PE content. It's also a way to allow your students to engage with the language, to practice with it, to practice with those content concepts, and to interact with their peers. If you have students who perhaps they don't want to change, or they don't want boys and girls to mix together, this is a way that you can keep them moving. You can continue to reinforce the PE content, all while respecting their backgrounds, their experiences, and their home cultures. And it is a way to provide for a platform for collaboration and co-construction of knowledge. And as our PE teachers like them to do, it gets them moving.
Okay, next up we have KWL charts. Okay, so this stands for I know, I want to know, I learned. So the KWL charts are an easy way to figure out what students already know about a topic, what they're curious about, and then how to assess what they learned about a topic. This tool assists students in activating prior knowledge or building background knowledge around a topic, as each student records what he or she knows individually. The KWL chart promotes interaction between students. It allows them to discuss what they want to know with a partner. And as a formative assessment tool, students record what they learned about the topic after the lesson.
Good. Okay, so rather than giving students a worksheet to complete on their own, we would suggest that you remix the worksheet. So this was a worksheet that our health teacher had to give her students about a review for their test on STDs. And rather than having them complete these 10 questions on their own, she cut them up and put them on index cards. And instead of having them work on it by themselves, it became more accessible to ELLs because they could work at one question at a time. She also, in another class, she created stations that had 2 or 3 questions that a group of students would have to answer at once, and then they'd move around the room and answer the next 2 to 3. They would record them in their interactive notebook. Another way to do this is a jigsaw. So one student becomes the expert, and as the groups circulate through, that expert student facilitates the conversation and is the expert to teach if there's any questions that come up. So it's a way to differentiate your instruction here. And again, they can record their answers either collaboratively or individually. They can show their work, and they can put this all together in their interactive notebooks.
Okay, and the final instructional strategy that we have to share with you is a FRAIR model poster. So you may have heard of FRAIR models, and maybe you currently use these for concept development in your teaching. A FRAIR model is a way of representing a concept or vocabulary word in 4 different ways. For example, the one on the slide asks students to write the definition in their own words, draw a picture, use the word in a sentence, and write the word in their own language. Teachers can decide which 4 representations they would like to do. This can be all switched up. We advocate putting students in small groups to make FRAIR model posters instead of individual cards. Why? Because, once again, it is a way to encourage student interaction and speaking. This is how it can be done with Tier 2 or Tier 3 vocabulary. Students could work together to create posters, each pair being responsible or an expert for one word, and then each pair presents their poster to the class. You can hang the posters up in the classroom, display their work, and that shows that you're proud of what they've done, but it also allows students to have that scaffold, something to refer back to when they continue learning in the next unit.
Okay, so I see that we're approaching 5 o'clock here. So we just have some final thoughts that we'd like to share with you. And these thoughts include the idea that some of your ELLs are going to need more supports and more scaffolds than others. And this is why it's so vitally important to know who your students are, their current levels, their interests, their prior learning experiences, again, both formal and informal. You can use this information to support their learning from an asset stance, beginning with what they can do. The use of formative assessment is an invaluable tool for differentiating to meet them at their current entry points. Celebrate their victories, big and small. Provide them with explicit and targeted feedback that will show them how to build on their strengths and improve and build on what they know and what they can do.
So that is the end of our webinar for today. We thank you for attending, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have. We see a few that have come in, if we can get to them. I don't know if that was for us. That may have been.
Hi, this is Joanna. I mean, we do want to respect everyone's time. If you see one of the questions that you guys want to answer in about a minute, I think we could do that. Otherwise, we can talk about other ways, maybe following on from this, that we could get some answers out to the crowd from some of these questions.
Let's see.
Well, I didn't really get to, you know, in respect of everybody's time, we do have our email addresses up there, because I would hate to try and rush through reading a question and trying to come up with an answer like super quick and not fully respond to it. So why don't we handle it this way? If you want to email us with your questions, Karen and I can respond to them and kind of put a little bit more thought into it, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That is really gracious of you all to offer. So yeah, so thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. We have one final slide over here as well. We wanted to thank a big thank you to Karen, Gregory, and Gretchen Oliver for sharing their expertise with us today. And thank you again for offering to allow people to send you an email with follow-up questions. We really appreciate your expertise. And we want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, taking the time to participate with us. We hope it's been helpful to you as you work to support English learners in your schools and classrooms. We'd also like to extend one final invitation to continue to connect and collaborate with us and your fellow educators on Education Connections. Feel free to reach out to our team at edconnect@cal.org with any questions you may have about the webinar or the community. Thanks again, and we hope everyone has a wonderful holiday.